see Oddly Freed. I see all these people. They're all there having coffee, and you're just at that point you're just hanging out with these guys because they all live here. So you got to, like Michael Rhodes said, you got to be present to win. Live in town. Get out and meet as many people as you can. You know, if you're a picker, an instrumentalist, which I am, I don't sing or write lyrics, but if you're an instrumentalist, you're going to be able to work here and get paid for it a lot quicker than a songwriter or somebody that's trying to be a country music star. Because those people are going to hire you to play their demos and their, you know, we used to have showcases here where, you know, I would get hired to go back up some artist that they were showcasing at 12th and Porter or 3rd and Lindsley or something. So if you're a player, you're going to work. It's going to be easier to get work and get paid for it than it is if you're a songwriter. You could write songs here for 20 years and never get a song that's going to allow you to survive. And it's brutal, but that's the truth. And so, you know, I would say this is kind of specific for whatever your passion is. If it's being a guitar player, you know, move to Nashville, get out and meet a bunch of people. Try to be well-rounded. Try to be versatile. Learn to speak some vocabularies of classic music, you know, blues, country, funk, rock and roll, pop music. You know, you got to learn how to play some south of the border beach stuff. You know, I mean, you got to be able to speak the language to work as a musician. All these things are not specific to the music business. We would be talking about these same things if we were sitting here talking about how to run a restaurant. We'd probably be talking about the same things. Look, man, basic life skills. Have some respect for your elders. Show up on time. You know, don't drink till after 5 o'clock maybe or something. I don't know. Fuck, I'm making shit up. But you know, like, you know, just basic life skills. You know, learn how to communicate with people. Have a sense of humor. Have some personality. You know, show up. Bring something to the table. I would much rather work with somebody that is a good hang and maybe not like the greatest musician that you could have possibly called to do this. Well, that person might be, probably like myself, might be a pain in the ass to work on.
What is your relationship to theory, music theory?
Well, I have zero formal music training or education of any kind, which I probably mentioned earlier. I think, honestly, it's okay to know as much music theory as you can learn, but I think you need to learn how to hear music first and then apply the music theory. Because if you just know the theory, but you don't know, you can't hear what's going on, I think that's where people get into trouble. So a lot of times if I'm teaching, a guy will come in and tell you like, okay, well, hey man, I know my chord shapes, I know this, I know that, without ever touching an instrument. And then I ask them to play something and they don't know what they are telling you that they know. So to me, talking about music versus playing it and giving examples, you know, with the guitar in your hand, which I'm sure we'll do here in a minute, but it's like me trying to tell you what a peach tastes like. You know, I could try to, how are you going to describe what a peach tastes like to somebody?
There's like a sharp 11 in it, flat 13,
or yeah, hey, it's a fruit, it's kind of juicy, you know, versus me just not saying one word and handing you a peach and going, there you go, that's what it is. So to me, that's kind of what talking about, and me telling you what I know. Well, I know what a triad is. That's a root, third, and fifth, and then you can drop this and you get another chord, and you're obtaining these sounds. But if I can't make music with that knowledge, then to me that's completely useless. And so I can tell you, in the recordings that I've done here and the gigs that I've played and the musicians that I've worked with, not one time has any producer or any artist of any level ever asked me if I know music theory. And they've never, ever, I can say this with confidence, and people are going to blow back on this, but of all the musicians I've ever worked with in Nashville, in any situation, I've never heard anybody talk about a mode ever. Nobody has mentioned the word mode since I moved here 25 years ago.
No kidding.
And I'm talking about bluegrass gigs, jazz gigs, rock artists, pop artists, anybody. Never, not once.
How do they refer to those different types of sounds?
That's
Scale
what they are.
modifications.
They're sounds.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think, you know, listening to a lot of music when you're young, growing up around a lot of music, as diverse as you can. I got into Cuban music, got into jazz. I'm not a jazz musician. You guys know that. But pulling from those, learning to speak the language. And so being well-rounded, being versatile, knowing how to play with a songwriter. You know, if somebody throws a Latin groove out, you've got some, I'm not going to say tricks or licks, because we don't want to just be inserting paint by number things into these situations. It's like, oh, well, I don't mean this. Oh, I've got some rock licks. I've got some blues licks. I've got some country licks. I've got some jazz licks. It's like, no, they need to be ideas, and you need to know this fingerboard well enough to where you can truly improvise through these different chord changes and through these different sounds. And so to me, it's less about genre specific and more just about the music that's going on in that moment. Now, of course, yeah, if it's, and that doesn't mean, you know, playing something that's not appropriate for the music that's going on in that moment. Of course, we need to be able to speak from, speak some traditional blues vocabulary. I mean, if somebody starts doing this, you know, you're going to know, okay, well, that's probably not a good place to start doing steel guitar bends. But with that being said, you can borrow and intertwine these different styles together as long as it's tasteful and it makes sense. So I think there's a lot of gray area there, and I don't think that it's all black and white. I mean, so if somebody teaches you this scale, if you're playing a minor chord, and somebody teaches you that this is the natural minor scale. Okay, that sharp 5 note in there.
Yeah, they leave a 6 in
okay,
there.
that note. That note in the chord to me is
It sucks.
it sucks.
Yeah.
But this note.
Yeah, the 9.
The 9.
Yeah.
Or the minor 6.
Yeah.
Minor 7. The 9. Yeah. Those are all very useful chords. So
people would call that Dorian. Or they wouldn't.
Yeah. Don't, hey, watch your mouth.
Sorry.
but no, so, but the thing about, it's not that I'm not saying that modes are wrong. Clearly they're correct in what they are and the way people describe them and I guess their use.
Yeah.
But the problem is I'm not disagreeing or diminishing the knowledge of music theory and the way that the way people are thinking about this. All I know is when I hear people that are obsessed with theory and they're not using their ear, I don't want to listen to them. And I can tell, I can hear their brains working immediately. I can see the smoke coming out of their ears because it doesn't sound like they're flowing.
Yeah.
There's no flow there.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, and I'm not saying they're taking it to this level, but if you're thinking about every note that you're playing on the fingerboard while you're playing it, or you're thinking about what scale or what mode you're playing, or does this work over this, and you're using a lot of brain power that's going to distract you from flowing and just playing music, from feeling it and hearing it. And so if I had to, here's the way to kind of equate that is, if I'm speaking to you and I have to think of every letter of every word while I'm saying it, there's no way I could communicate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how, if I'm thinking about every note I'm playing while I'm trying to play a nice line, there's no way it's going to flow. And that's just the facts. I mean, but
you're using some amount, I guess.
And the jazz guys that do it, the guys like, I'm not going to name any names, but the guys we love that know exactly what they're doing. Yeah. Well, that's a small percentage of people that are they're feeling like somebody like John Scofield. Dude, he's written some of the most beautiful melodies and playing that's jazz kind of influenced, but at that point it's just great. There's just some great composing going on there. And dude, that guy's funky. He's greasy. He's doing all these amazing things. Robin Ford, deep passion for the blues. That guy can play anything. He played with Miles Davis. I mean, dude, he's a sophisticated musician, but his love for the blues, you can always hear that in his playing. And so, man, he's just playing music. And so those guys, they're few and far between. There's only a few of them that are thinking about it and on that level, but are also really, you're really feeling what they're playing too. And so I think that's the big thing is just, and so that note, like with that minor scale, I quickly just learned that, like, man, if you're playing, like, C, A minor, that note's not going to work over the A minor in that situation. It's just not going to sound good. And if you're recording that, the producer's probably going to stop and go, man, that note's not working.
Yeah.
Well, that's the scale that I learned in school. Well, then you're fired.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that simple. I mean, it's either your ear is the final judge. And man, I know a lot of you guys are going to blow back on all these things that I'm saying, but I'm telling you, man, I mean, your ear is the final judge. It's like when you go to a restaurant and you have, we're about to eat these amazing tacos that are on the way. When you go to a restaurant and you're eating this amazing food, you're not asking the chef if he had the correct combination of salt and whatever. It's like, well, did he measure that out to be perfect? You could give a shit. You're like, man, this is a fucking amazing meal. This is incredible. I don't care how they got there, as long as they got there.
Yeah. So
that's my whole thing on it. And I'm not saying I know everything, but I can hear the difference.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can't.
Yeah, I kind of view it as like different levels of abstraction. It's like, I know you talk a lot about the cage system or
man,
arpeggios over the top. So that's sort of like one theory tool that serves as an abstraction to sound good over chord changes. So you're not just playing pentatonic scales over everything.
And look, man, hey, if you're going to make it and be a working musician, then yes, you have to be able to communicate some of these things. And so,
what are those tools?
Well, absolutely.
What are the fundamentals that you're like, this is essential if you're going to work?
I think the fundamentals that are essential are, yes, you need to know your chord shapes up the fingerboard. You need to be able to tell people what key you're in. You need to know some basic theory. And so, you need to know what a triad is and how to build a triad. You need to know the major scale and how to number that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nashville number system, 1, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4, 5 dominant, 7. And then with the Nashville number system, you can take that and notate it as specific as you want to get. I mean, I've seen Nashville charts where, it's a chord chart, but above it are musical notation written out, a riff or a line or something. So the Nashville number system doesn't always mean just easy and basic. You can get very specific with it, or it can be just a rough roadmap. But, having some basic theory, but if you can't hear those sounds, like if I take a C triad, if I take this triad, that's going to repeat itself on the fingerboard all the way up the neck. So with those 3 notes, if I can hear that, and I drop the root down a half step, then I get a major 7 chord. If I drop that root down a whole step, I get a dominant 7 chord. If I drop the third down a half step, I get a minor. So each one of those chords, that is like, those are all completely different sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in one note, everybody wants to play lead guitar, but lead guitar is directly related to these chords.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the same. As soon as you can see this as the same thing, then you're good. Rhythm guitar is not just limited to chords, and single note is not just single notes. It's just the way you approach it. So, you know, if you play a triad, that just means you're playing a cluster of notes together. A chord is a cluster of notes together for the common sound. If I take this sound and I outline that, then I'm playing the single notes that spell out that chord and that accommodate that chord. Mm-hmm. If I play a major 7, no extra charge for mistakes. but that's the sound of that chord, you know. I need to be able to access that sound. If it's a minor or whatever, you know, you're able to hear those sounds.
Yeah.
So one note is changing. You can't just use the minor pentatonic over everything.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just not going to work. Especially, so to me, the big departure is from major pentatonic, which you can use for certain things, minor pentatonic, or, you know. But when you go to the dominant 7 chord, to me, that's where the next chapter of your guitar playing, it kind of comes in, because you don't get a pentatonic for the dominant 7 chord. There is no pentatonic for the dominant 7. You have to incorporate a little bit of both of those sounds. You're getting the major third, the flat 7 against the 1. You know, as soon as you start hearing how that tritone, you know, 1, 4, 5. As soon as you can start outlining that stuff, you're kind of off to the races, you know. That's the same lick over every, you know. I mean, that's a very, you know, specific example. I wouldn't like play that, like take a solo playing that, but that's how, you know, you're, you know, C, C7, F, F7, just a 3-chord progression. But you gotta have the blues chord progression internalized, like it's your heart beating, because everything else after that is based on that pulse of, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3. It could be a 12 bar, it could be whatever, but it's going to have that pulse of, like, you know, you're going to hear the pull and push of when the 4 chord's coming, the 5 chord back to the 1 chord. I mean, it's simple and basic, kind of, but to really get into everything that you can do and how that affected the rest of the music that we are playing, whether it's country, funk, pop, rock, heavy metal, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all based on that pulse of the blues.
Yeah.
And so if you think the blues is easy or it's simple and it's to be overlooked, you're making a huge mistake. And that's my opinion.
I have a question. So I've seen you play at the Underdog quite a few times at this point, and I hear in your playing some sophisticated ideas. And to my ears, it's like often over like dominant chords, you will hit altered tones like if you were coming from a theoretical perspective, you would say that's the altered scale. That's like the 7th mode of melodic minor, or Lydian dominant over the top of a dominant chord. Have you gone down those paths, and are you deriving that from that, or is it just sort of like your ears just lead you into those altered sounds?
Yeah. And I'll wrap up that last question with just this. So when I was younger, I watched a video, and I was stuck soloing and trying to play bluegrass songs down in the open chord shapes, and everything up here was a mystery. And so when I watched Pat Flynn VHS tape, I can't remember the title of it, it was on Homespun tapes, and he said, if you want to learn how to solo up the fingerboard and open up the fingerboard, learn your chord inversions. There was no cage system back then. You know, so okay, say you're in the key of A. The caged pattern in the title of that clever term doesn't even start until the what is that, the 10th fret, right? And so it doesn't spell caged until C-A-G. So if I'm playing in A, the clever caged word, it doesn't even start, pattern doesn't even start till you're up here, you're already done. And so we got to get away from these clever terms like caged. That's confusing the shit out of people, because that's just a pattern that happens if you're starting in the key of C.
Yeah.
There's your shape, C-A-G-E-D. That spells caged in C. But if I start on the D, well, then that pattern doesn't start until here. If I'm in E, that cage doesn't even start here, right? So that's kind of what we got to think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, but he called it just learning your chord inversions up the neck, the 5 shapes, and then learning the information around those shapes. So once you do that, then you can kind of see like everything's repeating itself. And then the guitar fingerboard really opens up, because it's like what I try to teach is like the house analogy is the chord's the foundation, the arpeggio is the 2x4 framework, the pentatonic is the sheetrock, the major scale is the wallpaper, and then improvising and soloing is the artwork and the furniture. And so that is like and it has to be in that sequence. If you're learning this for the first time, it needs to be, I don't have many rules clearly, but that's one that's pretty damn important. It's like the chord is the foundation, seeing these constellation shapes. I've based my whole knowledge of the instrument on those. And so once you see that it's like one note moving in the triad that allows you to access major, minor, dominant 7, major 7, well then, you know, it's about really just listening and saying what you want to say. So, I mean, a lot of times I'll hear guys say, well, that's a G7. That means it's really the 5 chord of C. Well, I got maybe on some you know, diagram that you're finding online somewhere. But as far as I'm concerned, if somebody's playing this, and not everything I play is country and blues, but they're great examples. And so if somebody's playing a blues in G, I mean, it could be a jazz blues, you know, it doesn't matter. But if the root chord is a dominant 7, and the 4 chord is a dominant 7, and the 5 chord is a dominant 7, it's a blues, then I'm in the key of G. The G is the 1 chord, because if you're hearing it any differently, you're not going to be playing over it properly. So, and all the hardcore theory that's like, okay, well the 3 chord has to be a minor. Well, no, not if you're playing a secondary dominant. Not if the chord progression's going. Okay, well,
5, 7, 3.
So that 3 chord.
Yeah. So that choice of the sharp 5 over that, that is that derived from some theoretical basis, or is that just like my ear wants to hear that?
Yeah, just kind of like that. I mean, that's kind of like, I wouldn't say like a trick, but that's just something you got in your bag that, you know, I kind of like that sound. But so that's like an example to me would be like, okay, well, I don't want to be hindered by any rules. If my ear is accepting it as something that is going to work appropriately in any given situation, then it's okay. And so I don't want to, you know, well, that 3 chord has to be a minor. Well, it doesn't have to be a minor. You can do anything you want on this guitar. There are no rules, but and so like, you know, people go, okay, well, the G dominant 7 chord has to be the 5 of C. Well, when you start thinking like that, that's where you're getting in trouble. because what you heard was every 5 chord needs to be a dominant 7 for the most part, even though the 5 minor is a beautiful sound. If I'm playing, you know, that's a great sound.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an exception. But for the most part, you know, if I'm playing you know, if the 5 chord's a D in the key of G, I still need to, I can't play, you know, you're not going to play the D major scale over the 5 chord. It's going to be, for the most part, the 5 chord is going to be, because you're
scale formerly known as Mixolydian. Yeah.
Dominant 7 scale.
Yeah. Dominant 7 scale. Yeah.
Because that's the rub.
Yeah.
And that resolves. You know, if you're playing, you know, D7. So I'm thinking of, when I play this chord, when I go from this chord to this chord, that's a minor insertion of what I call a recurring chord relationship. 5 to the 1.
But in the context of
the context of that little, for that split second, I can play, you know, and then right back to E7. So if I'm thinking about a mode over that, those chords are happening too quick for me to jump from mode to mode. I want to be playing over the sound of the chord, right?
Yep.
And that, to me, that's the playing that I want to hear, or guys spelling out the chord, man.
And so you're just thinking of like, okay, I've got some cluster of notes that includes a flat 7 and the rest of the notes in the major scale.
Yeah. And so my little trick, and I will say this is a trick, but because it's the way I think about it, is, so if I'm playing over a dominant 7 chord, if I'm playing over any dominant 7 chord, I can play ideas stemming from the 5 minor or the flat 7 major 7 over the 1 dominant.
Yep.
And that might sound like some slick music theory, but the way I'm approaching it is very simple. I'm taking the arpeggios and some of these scales that I already have figured out over the minor sound and the major 7 sound over the bass tone of whatever dominant 7 chord you're playing.
Yeah.
So, and that rule applies to every single dominant 7 chord. If I'm playing an E7, I can play ideas out of the 5 minor, which would be B minor, or D major 7 over E7. So an example of that would be like this, because if this is E7, here's my E7 scale out of the G shape. Okay, well, those same notes, there's a D major 7 over E.
Yeah.
So if I go, that's D major 7 over E.
Yeah. So in other words,
so it all becomes the same sound.
Yeah.
Here's B minor over E7.
Yeah. With the two kind of
vibe. It's all about how you resolve that. So it all starts becoming the same thing. Now look, if I'm in A, and that works. That little rule applies to any dominant 7 chord I'm playing over. I'm not going to do that all the time. And if you don't resolve it right, you're going to sound like you're playing in the wrong key.
Right.
But you're just taking those little ideas and the frameworks of the dominant, or the major 7 arpeggios over. You're just layering in these templates over the different sounds. So blanket key is whatever chord you're playing over. And then you kind of can steal these little ideas. It's kind of a way to get some jazz phrasing and play outside a little bit without having to rewire your whole approach. Now look, if I'm playing A minor, I'm just grabbing A minor because I got more fretboard to work with. But A minor, now I can play C major 7 and D7 over A minor. So I'll steal those ideas. So the same licks I would use over A7 out of G major 7. So basically it's like this. The note that makes the chord is the major 7 I'm able to steal from. So anytime I'm in if I'm in A7, wherever there's a G note, I can, you know, anytime there's a G, I can create a G major 7 idea over A7. And so anytime there's a E minor, you know, there's G major 7 over A.
Do you ever use the diminished 2 over the dominant 7 chord?
I don't. I'm gonna get you to show me that in just a second. But let me finish this thought. So if I'm in A minor, the note that makes A minor is C. So I'm going to the minor third of A and creating minor major 7 arpeggios over the A minor. And then the D7 would be a minor 6. So right, so as long as you don't hit that, you're good. So if I'm here, look at that, the minor 9, our beloved minor 9 chord, that note is the top note of the C major 7. So right there, you're already there. This, right, so that's a C major 7 down a D dominant 7 heading to A minor. And I'm not changing chord, I'm not playing those chords. It would be like everything would be over, you know. You know, it's over an A minor vamp, but all that. Now, I'm not staying on those notes very long. I'm peppering those in really quick and then quickly getting back to like an A minor vibe. But they're just kind of thrown in there very briefly, just to color it a little bit.
Super cool.